Thank you, Mr. Chair. And generally, I don't see eye to eye with many generals, and certainly General Milley and I have had disagreements. But I think what was said earlier was inappropriate in its nature to accuse a member of the military that they would tip off our opposition in any way. And I'd like to give General Milley an opportunity to respond to that if he wants. And if not, then I'll gladly continue with my questions.
As I said up front, I'm not going to tip off any enemy to what the United States is going to do in an actual plan. What I'm trying to do is persuade an adversary that's heavily armed, that was clearly and unambiguously, according to intelligence reports, very nervous about our behavior and what was happening inside this country. And they were concerned that President Trump was going to launch an attack. He was not going to launch an attack. I knew he wasn't going to launch an attack. At the direction of the Secretary of Defense, I engaged the Chinese in order to persuade them to do that. I would never tip off any enemy to any kind of surprise thing that we were going to do. That's a different context than that conversation.
Thank you, General. Thank you to all three witnesses for taking the time to testify today. Obviously, the resurgence of the Taliban is devastating and is difficult for many of us to watch. But sadly, it underlines the reality that after 20 years, 4 U.S. presidents, and billions of dollars, the conditions for a peaceful and stable Afghanistan could not be created. That is why I believe President Biden made the right decision to withdraw. Staying in Afghanistan, a prolonged and stalled conflict would have required more troops and more resources with no clear timeline. And I don't believe that we could ask our servicemen and women to give their lives for a mission that in the end wouldn't have been successful. I do, like many of you here, applaud our troops for the tireless effort to evacuate American citizens, our allies, Afghan citizens, and everyone threatened by the Taliban. And I still believe we have a moral imperative to help those who helped us in Afghanistan. And I and many of us will do everything in our power to continue to do that. I have some questions to begin with. General Milley, in your testimony, you know that the speed and scope of the collapse of the Afghan army and the government was a surprise. Yet the Taliban was clearly gaining ground in June and especially July before their arrival in Kabul. As we not only look toward the future of Afghanistan, but also think about our operations across the globe, what lessons specific to our intelligence gathering and analysis do you think DoD can learn from this experience? Do you think it's time for a larger rethink within the department about how to assess intelligence in a very rapidly changing environment?
I do. I don't know the full answer yet, but I think that the primary reason we missed it was because we essentially cannot, and we have yet to develop a really effective technique to read people's hearts, their will, their mind, their leadership sort of skills. Those are intangibles. You know, the moral is to the physical is 3:1 in the conduct of war. So very difficult to measure. When we pull our advisors off of organizations at lower levels, you start missing that fingertip touch for that intangible of war. We can count the trucks and the guns and the units and all that. We can watch that from different techniques, but we can't measure a human heart from a machine. You got to be there to do that, and I think that was probably one of the most significant contributing factors to missing the deterioration in the morale of the Afghan army.
And I guess one of the things that I'm deeply disturbed by, and this can be either to General McKenzie or also Secretary Austin can jump in, speaking to a lot of service members, enlisted service members that have served for decades in and out of Afghanistan. They were always telling me something extremely different from what I was getting from reports from many of you generals here, that the Afghan army was not ready, that they were not going to be sustainable on their own. And so that, how did we miss that? How is it that a lot of, 18, 19-year-olds, mid-20-year-old E5s were predicting this, but yet some of our greatest minds, both on civilian side and, uniform side, absolutely missed this. And I think that's something that concerns me because, Afghanistan is done, but we're going to be obviously engaging all over the world. And this type of intelligence failure repeated could be, could be an existential threat to the national security of the United States. I don't know, General McKenzie, if you want to try that?
Sure. So I think it's a reasonable criticism. We'll have to take a look at how we actually remain connected to the people who are down at the advisory level. I think that's something that I'm conflicted by that as well. I'll be very candid with you. And we will certainly take a look at that because I've heard that same strain myself. It's harder to get the truth as you become more senior. We perhaps need to look at ways to ensure that that's conveyed in a more rapid and effective way. So I'll accept that criticism.
Thank you for your guys' testimony. I yield back.
Thank you.